Hi folks, welcome to AP BioFun with Dr. D. This is the first video in the series of how structure determines function, or a tale of biomolecules. And it aligns with Unit 1 of the AP Biology course and exam description. In this first part, we're going to be talking about carbon-based life, why life on Earth is carbon-based. So let's look at this formula. Is it familiar? What do you think the molecule is that has the following formula? C6H12O6. Now I want you to pause the video and think about it. What is the name of this formula? Where have you seen it? What is this molecule called? Once you've had a chance to try and figure out what the answer is, you can continue with the video. I bet most of you said glucose. This is the formula for glucose. You've seen this formula many times. However, this is also the formula for fructose. This is the sugar contained in fruit, and galactose. So three different sugars, three different molecules, glucose, fructose, and galactose, have the same formula, C6H12O6. How is that possible? Well, this formula is called a molecular formula. It tells us what kind of atoms are contained within the molecule and how many of them there are, what's the ratio. So there are 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. However, it does not tell us how these atoms are arranged within the molecule. This we can see from structural formulas. So the molecular formula simply lists the type of atoms and the number of atoms contained within the molecule. A structure formula is much more useful in organic chemistry because it shows us how these atoms are arranged. So what you will see here is the structure formulas of the 3 sugars, glucose, galactose, and fructose. Can you find and circle all the difference? Just like a game when look at 2 identical pictures and find all the differences. You can pause the video and try and do this. Or you can follow along. What you will see here is, let's examine the upper part of the structural formulas. These 2 molecules have identical upper parts. However, fructose looks quite different at this end of the molecule. You can see that the atoms are arranged quite differently. So that's one obvious difference between fructose and glucose and galactose. But what's the difference between glucose and galactose, you may wonder? Well, if you count down 4 carbons, what you will see is this. Here, we have on the left a hydrogen, and on the right, an oxygen and a hydrogen, or a hydroxyl group. Here, we have a hydroxyl group, an oxygen and a hydrogen to the left, and a hydrogen to the right. So the position are reversed. One is left-right, the other one is right-left. And I want you to carefully look again at glucose and galactose. This is a very, very small difference. Very small difference in the way the atoms are arranged. However, this small difference results in a completely different property for galactose and glucose. Both molecules have very different properties and therefore also very different functions. And this is the theme of this whole topic, how even small changes in structure can result in big changes in properties and function. Glucose, galactose, and fructose are all hexoses. Comes from the Greek term hex for 6, and os, you probably remember from biology, is the suffix used for sugars. So these are sugars that contain 6 carbons. They're structural isomers, meaning they have the same chemical formula, C6H12O6, but they have a different arrangement of atoms. Carbon compounds are interesting because of exactly this. You can have molecules with the same molecular formula, but with different structures. They can have different shapes. Different shapes means different chemical properties. Different chemical property means different biological functions. Why is carbon important to life? The study of all classes of carbon-containing compound is called organic chemistry. Those of you that are interested into going into the healthcare field and medicine will have to take organic chemistry in college. Biological chemistry or biochemistry is really the study of the chemistry of living systems. The carbon atom is the most important atom in biological molecules, and all life as we know it on planet Earth is carbon-based. The specific bonding properties of carbon account for the characteristics of carbon-containing compounds. Carbon can build complex molecules, and it can literally assemble them like Lego blocks, like Tinker Toys. You can have small units arranged in many different ways and assemble larger and larger and more complex structures. That is the beauty of carbon. What you will see here is the formula for several hydrocarbons: methane, ethane, and ethene. Now, hydrocarbons are exactly what the name implies. They contain hydrogen and carbon. They're very nonpolar. The covalent bond between carbon and hydrogen is nonpolar. The electrons are shared almost equally. And because they're nonpolar, if a molecule only contains carbons and hydrogen, it is very hydrophobic. It does not like water. It's not soluble in water. Now, they're very stable compounds, and there's very little attraction between molecules. Most of these are actually gases at room temperature. If you look down below here, you will see propane and butane. Propane and butane are common gases used in your barbecues, for instance, or for heating purposes, or in your ovens in the kitchen. Hydrocarbons here are basically hydrocarbons that have commercial applications, right? So we use them in, benzene is used in gasoline that we put in cars. Butane and propane are used in heating homes and powering ovens and barbecues, and so on and so on. So these are hydrocarbons. They're considered subject to organic chemistry, but they're not really part of living organisms. So where are they coming from? How did they get to be? And why do we call them organic? Well, the reason we call them organic is because they're products of organisms. They're products of the metabolism. And metabolism, by metabolism, we mean chemical reactions that occur in living organisms. For instance, yeast produces ethanol. Ethanol is a hydrocarbon, also known as alcohol. As part of its metabolism, yeast can produce alcohol. Cow farts, I'm sure you've heard about cow farts. Part of the gases that most animals produce are methanes. Methane is produced in cow farts. So they're products of metabolism. They're really products of the metabolizing bacteria inside the cow. But some of these hydrocarbons are literally produced by gas waste products. Fossil fuels. You know about fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are the remnants of long dead organisms, such as dinosaurs. And here's a funny cartoon. Dinosaurs create fossil fuels. Fossil fuels, such as oil, are used to make plastic. Plastic is used to make Legos. Legos can be used to build dinosaurs, or in general, plastic can be used to be built little tiny toy dinosaurs. So we are full circle. So essentially, all of these hydrocarbons with commercial uses are actually the products, I'm sorry, and I advanced too fast. All of these hydrocarbons that have commercial use are the products of currently living or once living organisms, which means they once used to be larger molecules, the so-called biological molecules that we're going to be studying, and that are used to build functioning living organisms. Okay, so the chemistry of life. Life as we know it is carbon-based, and carbon atoms are very versatile building blocks. They have excellent binding properties. They can form 4 stable covalent bonds, as shown here. And they can form covalent bonds with a variety of atoms, such as oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen. These are some biologically important atoms. And their valences is shown here. So carbon can form 4 covalent bonds, oxygen 2, hydrogen 1, nitrogen 3. Biologically important molecules are often called macromolecules. Macro stands for large. That's because they tend to be quite large. Sometimes you will see the term biomolecules or organic molecules. So let's just explore for a moment, why is life carbon-based? What is so special about carbon? Well, carbon, as I already told you, has a valence of 4, so it can form 4 covalent bonds with a variety of atoms, which means it can build a large variety of compounds with relatively few kinds of atoms. So if you just take CHNOPs, which you probably learned in bio, CHNOPs, which are the most common elements that build life, you can actually build quite a large array of molecules with different structures and different functions, and thereby you can build a living cell in a living organism. Now, carbon is unparalleled in its ability to form large, complex, and diverse molecules. Carbon-containing molecules are quite stable. The covalent bonds between 2 carbons are very strong, and they require more energy to be broken. The stability of the carbon bonds really sustains life. And why is that? Because Earth is exposed to energy from the light from the sun, visible light. There is UV light, there's all kinds of radiation. All of this energy that hits, the energy that hits Earth, that is not filtered by our atmosphere, does not have enough energy to break the carbon covalent bonds. Therefore, carbon compounds are actually quite stable. Now, the fundamental principle of biological chemistry is that the macromolecules, the large biological molecules, are responsible for most of the form and order of living systems and are generated by the polymerization of small organic molecules. The repeating units are called monomers. An example would be glucose, which is present in sugar, table sugar, or starch. Amino acids, which build proteins, and nucleotides, which build nucleic acids. Lipids, fats, are large biological molecules that are not polymers. They don't have a repeating unit, but they're quite large. So how do we build polymers? Well, the synthesis, Greek word for synthesis means putting things together, is called dehydration synthesis or condensation reaction. The 2 terms mean the same thing. You build the monomers by taking water out. One of the monomers will donate a hydroxyl group. The other monomer is going to donate a hydrogen ion, and together they will form water. This, of course, requires energy and enzymes. Cells contain 4 different kinds of macromolecules, and you should be familiar with this. The major macromolecular polymers in the cell are proteins, nucleic acids, and polysaccharides. In addition to that, we have lipids and fats. Nucleic acid and proteins have a variety of monomers that may be arranged in nearly limitless ways. The order and type of monomer are critical for function. Polysaccharides are usually composed of 1 to 2 monomers, and they're relatively few. So, proteins and nucleic acids can vary widely because they're composed of multiple monomers. Polysaccharides are composed usually of 1 to 2 monomers, so there aren't that many different types of polysaccharides. The fourth kind of macromolecule is not a polymer, and this is lipids. And in the next few videos, we're going to be exploring each of these groups of macromolecules. Diversity of polymers. Each cell has thousands of different macromolecules. The macromolecules will vary among cells of an organism. They will also vary more within a species, and they'll vary even more between species. So for instance, the proteins in my liver cells will be different than the proteins in my muscle cells. And my proteins are different than your proteins, and our proteins are different than the proteins in bananas. An immense variety of polymers can be built from a small set of monomers, and that is crucial because that allows us to build, allows us, not us, but allows life to exist in many, many different forms. So the biologically important molecules, the biomolecules or the macromolecules, whatever you want to call them, what you need to know about them, this is prerequisite knowledge from biology before proceeding, is the following. You need to be able to identify the four groups. That means name them. You need to describe the basic elements which are found in each group. Example, lipids contain only C, H, and O, and nothing else. You need to be able to describe their functions, and all of their functions, not just one. And you need to distinguish between monomers and polymers and match the polymer with its respective monomer. So know that proteins are built from amino acids. And finally, we're going to end with this.